It is difficult to imagine the danger and destructive power of a fire, especially one that's out of control. And one of the prime and most important duties of an active, alert security guard is to help minimize the potential damage that a premises and its occupants can experience as a result of fire. The nature of fire is such that it can spread quickly and grow to out of control proportions, and the more quickly we respond to a potential possible fire or small fire, the more we can contain the danger that it might pose. Studies show that most fires result in partial, not total damage or total loss, and therefore the more quickly we can respond to a fire, the more quickly we can put out a fire, the more contained the resulting damage might be. I want to start with a basic review of some of the information materials you've already covered, starting with the question of what is a fire. Of course, we see the effects. We see we can see a fire, a glowing, hot ball of flames. But what, in essence, is the nature of a fire? A fire is a chemical process. In fact, it's a chain reaction that is created when three elements combine in the proper mixture, in the proper quantities, in the proper level. Those three components are oxygen. A fire needs oxygen in order to burn, and the air around us is composed of a sufficient level of oxygen to allow an exposed or an open flame to continue burning. A fire requires a fuel source, and different types of sources relate to or cause different kinds of fires. And a fire requires a sufficient level of heat. So if we put heat, fuel, and oxygen together in the right mixture and the right combination, the result will be that chain reaction we call combustion, or we call fire. So again, remember, the fire triangle in essence is made up of oxygen, fuel, and heat. If in fighting a fire we disrupt any one of those three elements, then we can put out the fire and stop its continued destruction. What does that mean? If we can sufficiently cool a fire, for example, by pouring water on a burning object, if it lends itself to being put out by fire, we cool the burning object sufficiently in order to disrupt that chain reaction that is combustion. If an area is deprived of oxygen, for example, if you are able to close off, to seal off a fire from new sources of oxygen, the flames themselves, the fire will die. And of course, the fire will die if it uses up all available fuel, or if it's deprived of new fuels. So the fire triangle of oxygen, heat, and fuel allows for combustion to take place. That's a chain reaction, and disrupting any one of those elements will discontinue the burning process. There are different kinds of fires, and I want to speak about the common types of fires that you are likely to encounter in your work as a security guard, starting with what we call a Class A fire. A Class A fire is the burning of common combustibles. Common combustibles include really any fibrous sort of material such as wood or cloth or paper. Those things that we traditionally think of as being able to catch fire. A Class A fire is a fire that that will burn so long as it has material to burn, or those other elements we spoke about, heat and oxygen. And the best way to put out a Class A fire is by cooling the burning surface. So if we could douse a Class A fire with water, that would be appropriate. The water itself will cool the burning surface, and cooling of that surface will put an end to the flames. One caution, of course, in connection to a Class A fire, for example, in relation to burning wood, is that we might put the flames out that appear on the surface of the wood, but the wood itself might continue, the internal temperature of the wood might continue to be very hot. So if I doused, if I splashed water on a campfire, as an example, the campfire itself might be out, but because water evaporates if it's heated, the internal temperature of the burning wood can sufficiently dry the surface. The heat within the wood itself, especially on the underside of any burning timbers, can reignite, and a fire can continue to burn. So for example, with a Class A fire, we have to be very careful that there are no sources able to reignite a fire once it's extinguished. A Class B fire is a little bit different from the last one that we spoke about. Class B fires have to do with liquids, burning liquids such as cooking oils, gasolines, other types of combustible materials. And the issue to remember with a Class B fire is that it's not the liquid itself that's burning, but rather the vapors emitted by the liquid which continue to burn. So if we are able to disrupt the combustion process, that is, put the fire out in a Class B fire, there is really no further risk of reignition unless there is a further ignition source, like an open flame in the area. A grease fire, cooking fire, is a good example of a Class B fire. And what I want you to understand is that the way we would fight a Class A fire is different than the way we might fight a Class B fire. We said earlier that you can douse a Class A fire with water. So if I use a hose in order to spray a burning surface, if it's made up of Class A combustibles, would be effective in putting the flames out. But if I were to take water and pour it on a Class B fire, which is burning liquids, oils and greases, of course water and oil don't mix. Water is lighter and less dense than, oil is less dense than water. So if I were to throw a bucket of water on a burning grease fire on a stove, what's likely to happen is that the grease, the burning grease, will dissipate, will spread all over the kitchen surface, and the flames themselves would spread to other combustible surfaces in the kitchen. It would be a very dangerous thing and the wrong way to fight a Class B fire. So the appropriate way to fight a Class B fire is, if possible, to deprive it of oxygen. So if we're talking about a kitchen fire, which most people can easily relate to, imagine a burning skillet on the stove. Take a cover and cover the burning flames if you safely can do so. As soon as you cover the surface of the flame itself uses up all available oxygen, and since there is no further oxygen, the flame will be put out. So fighting a Class B fire is different than a Class A fire. A Class C fire is generally one related to electrical materials, motors, wires, and so on, which will continue to burn so long as there is an open source of electricity feeding that fire. If you were to deprive the area of oxygen, well, as soon as the oxygen drifts back into the room, the fire will reignite. If you were to put out the fire in some way, again, it could still continue to reignite, particularly if you're using something dangerous in a Class C fire like water. Water is conductive to electricity, and imagine the danger if you were to take a hose and try to spray water on an electrical fire. The current causing the fire will likely travel back through the water to you holding that hose, so you'll never use water to fight a Class C fire. Instead, what you will use is an inert foam agent that will coat the fire and deprive it of its ability to burn. So Class C fires are fought differently than Class A and Class B fires. In the old days, different types of systems had to be in place to fight different types of fires. Today we're fortunate in that we generally use multi-purpose fire extinguishers that are suitable for both Class A, Class B, and Class C fires. They're very effective in that they spray a pressurized inert foam powder into the flaming surface, and that powder coating the flaming surface will put out the fire and prevent reignition. So multi-purpose fire extinguishers are a very effective way in dealing with most, not all, but most fires, most common fires. The problem with fire extinguishers is twofold. One is they must be accessible at all times. So as a security guard, you need to know where fire extinguishers are at any given time in any given location in the area that you're protecting. And second, fire extinguishers need to be inspected on a regular basis to ensure that they are pressurized, that they have not been tampered with, that they are in working order, and that's not the purpose of our video today. But the fact is that as a security guard, you should be aware of the location and operation of a fire extinguisher in the area that you protect. When you use a fire extinguisher, you need to remember a simple acronym that, when you are nervous and excited and not sure of what exactly to do, should help you remember the process of using and activating a multi-purpose fire extinguisher. The acronym that I want you to remember is PASS, P-A-S-S. I have a fire extinguisher here, which we can use for demonstration purposes. The extinguisher is made up of a pin, a handle, a nozzle, and now let's review the acronym PASS. The first thing that I want you to do when you need to activate a fire extinguisher is pull the pin which is kept in a secure location in order to prevent accidental triggering of the fire extinguisher. So pull the pin from the fire extinguisher. Aim the nozzle of the fire extinguisher not at the fire may be up here or over there. What we're really concerned about is the base of the fire, which is down on the ground. You have to understand where the flames or where the heat and smoke are emanating from. Squeeze the trigger of the fire extinguisher and spray the extinguisher from side to side. So we have P for pull the pin, A for aim the nozzle, S for squeeze the trigger, and S again from side to side. The acronym PASS is very important to ensure that you're able to manage to operate a fire extinguisher when and God forbid if necessary. There are different stages of a fire which you have also learned about in some of the materials that you have been reading so far, and those stages have to do with the way in which a fire ignites and burns and eventually dies down when it runs out of combustible materials. The first stage of a fire is the incipient stage, the stage at which the fire is just starting, and often in the incipient stage there is a potential that the fire might put itself out if it doesn't generate enough heat to continue burning, which is certainly what we anticipate and hope if we can prevent damage in the first place. Growth stage is when a fire is able to sustain itself and then it starts to spread and use up the available fuel, and it's that fuel that causes the fire to grow. Fully developed fire, the most dangerous time, of course, because of the heat and smoke and flames and devastation that the fire can cause, and the decay as the fire starts to use up all available combustible materials. Those are the stages of a fire which you would have and should definitely be aware of in relation to the materials that you have covered. Medical emergencies. A component of the training in which you're participating is first aid certification. So there are different ways for you to acquire first aid certification. It's certainly something that we will help direct you to since you're taking online training, which is a more convenient way to learn. Most of the training that you require for first aid certification is practical, so that's something that you will not be able to do online. When you are receiving first aid education and training, you'll encounter some of the common or most common issues that people experience and difficulties that people can experience in emergency situations, and your instructors will speak to you about how to assess and help people who are suffering some kind of medical distress. One of the things that I want to discuss with you and briefly review is the importance of ensuring that you seek the consent of the person you are helping before administering any form of assistance. People do have the right to make decisions as to what should happen to them so long as they are able, and in the materials that you have reviewed, you will have read or will read details about ensuring that you do obtain consent. It is a very important component of being able to effectively provide first aid treatment to any individual. Bomb threats. Unfortunately, in the world that we are living in today, it's not altogether uncommon for a facility, especially a high-profile facility, to be affected by a bomb threat, which may be a genuine threat or it may be a hoax. Unfortunately, there are very few signs that can indicate to us that a bomb threat call is in fact a hoax. So we always take threats seriously. In every site that you protect, and particularly high-profile sites that are more likely to be potential targets of either terrorists or other individuals who may wish to cause some damage and destruction, a plan has been established, has been developed in order to help you deal with a bomb emergency, a potential bomb threat or bomb emergency. And your standard operating procedures or your post orders will generally detail what to do in the event of having received a bomb threat or a bomb call. For the purpose of our discussion, we're imagining that someone has telephoned your facility, that telephone call may have been answered by a security guard who may be attending at a front desk or an entryway of a facility, and that you have received a bomb threat call. It could be any other employee within the facility as well, and therefore anybody who potentially could answer a telephone and receive a bomb threat should be equally aware of some basic guidelines that we follow in relation to bomb threats. Now, this is not, in terms of our video, a complete discussion of bomb threat protocols. In order to do that, you're going to have to go further into the materials that we have provided for you as part of this course. But I wanted to review some basic issues with you. And the first thing that I want you to understand is if you pick up a telephone call and recognize that what you're receiving is a bomb threat, it's essential that you try to control your instincts, which will likely be to act without really thinking. It's essential that you stop and think about the opportunity that you have with this telephone call to acquire, to get certain information from the caller. Now, there's obviously a reason that the caller is making that telephone call, whether it's to provide warning in order to minimize civilian damage, or whether it's because that caller is seeking some kind of attention. The fact is that you have an opportunity to communicate with that person, and as a security guard, you have to recognize how important that communication is. By speaking with the caller, you have an opportunity to acquire information, and the more information, the more time you spend with that caller on the telephone, the more information you'll be able to acquire, the more effective that will be for us. So, if somebody calls and says, "Oh, there's a bomb set to go off on the premises," don't say, "Oh my God, I'm going to hang up and get everybody out of here," because that discontinues any potential you have for acquiring further information from the caller. Instead, what you need to do is condition yourself, and that often requires some preparation and practice and rehearsal. Condition yourself to ask questions, and some of the questions that you would ask include details about where the bomb is, what kind of bomb it is, when was the bomb planted, what will cause that bomb to go off, why did you place a bomb in the premises, and you have a bomb threat checklist, a sheet that's included as part of your materials that will always try to guide you through that process. Now, the reason that it's important to have that threat assessment, that call sheet with you, is that you may not have the presence of mind because of the urgency, because of the pressure or the tension of the moment, to really think clearly about what questions you want to ask. So what you should remember is that in most security stations, and in most telephone stations, most locations where a call of this type might be received, a copy of the bomb threat checklist is usually positioned, placed, either taped on the surface of the table or loosely kept under the telephone set on the desk that you are manning. So quite often all you'll need to do is move the telephone set, and beneath it you'll be able to see a copy of a bomb threat checklist, the sheet that will help guide you in terms of the kinds of questions that you need to ask somebody threatening a bomb. Now, remember that it's not just the questions and the answers that are provided, but it also has to do with the way in which the answers are provided. Listen to the caller's voice. Listen to anything that might be distinctive about the voice. Listen to any particular speech patterns. Listen for background noise that might give you a hint as to where the caller is at the time that he or she is making the call, and any other information that potentially might help you identify that caller. While call displays are not completely reliable in terms of giving you the number, if a number does pop up on your call display, make sure that you take note of what that telephone number is. Keep the caller speaking as long as you possibly can. But this is an urgent and an important situation, and therefore what we hope is that you'll be able to get hold of a colleague guard, somebody else on your shift, and let them know discreetly by writing a message to them on a sheet of paper nearby that this is a bomb threat. Generally speaking, if your company provides you with a set of 10 codes, the bomb threat, the common bomb threat 10 code is generally, depending on the sheet that's being used, either 1099 or 10100. It tends to be the one of the last 10 codes on any code sheet. So make sure you're familiar with it, and if you were simply to write to your colleague 10100, that colleague should understand that you're in the midst of receiving a bomb threat. That colleague should step away from the open area, the area in which you currently are, and go to a discreet landline and contact police on an emergency basis in order to report that you are in the midst of receiving a bomb threat. It is always important to notify police. They have the resources and the personnel and the equipment to deal with bomb threats. Of course, you have to make some decisions when you receive a bomb threat in terms of what to do. The last thing we ever want a security guard to do is make an announcement, okay, everybody out of the building, there's a bomb threat. What's likely to happen in a situation like that is people will fight to get out as quickly as they can, and they'll end up trampling each other in order to make it out of the door quickly. And that can cause more injuries that might have been caused by the bomb itself. So you have to assess things like the wisdom of evacuating. You know, a potential terrorist who is intent on causing destruction might place a bomb in a common area, an open area of a facility, an open lobby, or near an exit or doorway of a facility, and therefore if you evacuate people and they're all rushing to the doors and a bomb does go off, it can cause far more devastation or destruction. And as well, you should remember that there have been terrorist incidents where terrorists have planted multiple bombs intending to cause more damage, particularly as people try to flee and evade a scene or an area. So be cautious. It may be necessary to evacuate a premises based on the instructions and information in your post orders, but be wise about it. First of all, if you've decided to evacuate, never announce this is an evacuation based on a bomb threat, because that will induce panic in people, and again, they are rushing out of the premises on an urgent basis, is likely to cause more damage and harm than the bomb itself might have potentially caused. And therefore, if we've decided to evacuate, we always use some type of pretext, such as potentially announcing that there's a possible gas leak in the area, or some other potential problems that require a temporary evacuation of the premises. Always keep people as calm as possible in the event of an evacuation of the facility. There is an extensive amount of information provided in the course materials for you in this regard, as well as that which will be provided on site by your supervisors. So be very cautious about dealing with and managing a bomb threat and conditions surrounding that possible threat.